The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Hello and welcome to Practically Magic. You are here with Courtney Pwyll. I am here to teach you how to be a magical creature that you are. I am a pagan witch, card reader, healer, spiritualist, Celtic priestess, teacher, artist, mystic seeker. And today we are going to dive very nicely into some Celtic traditions and Celtic spirituality. I am very excited to talk about some of the things that we've mentioned in other episodes, and I kept teasing it like, oh, we'll talk more about that on a future episode, and that future episode is here. This is it. We've made it. We are going to talk about the in-between spaces today and why that is sacred and special and why we can feel it. But first, we're going to start our episode with pulling a card, as we always do. This is the card that is going to help solidify the message we are here to receive today. Hopefully, those of you listening, whatever time and place you happen to be hearing this, you will know that this message is just for you. And today I am going to be using the Celtic Healing Oracle deck. Picked this out because the subject today is very Celtic inspired, very much Druid spirituality, the wisdom keepers of Northern Europe, if you will. A lot of the wisdom that was lost because they only operated in oral traditions. So while we cannot guarantee that this is ancient wisdom, it is something that practitioners like myself have been accumulating and trying to rediscover and learn within ourselves. And I feel like as long as we are authentic and as long as we are going about it in a way that feels aligned for us, then we are on the right path. So this deck, I love the back of it because it has the 3 spirals and it's very it's green, and the artwork in it is always in black and white. Not a lot of grays. In fact, I don't think there's any shading or grays. It's all in black and white. I love that. I pick my decks based on artwork more than anything. And when I saw this one, not only did I love it because it was a Celtic oracle deck, but because it just had a very different vibe. It was very kind of like what you would imagine just a black tattoo, tribal tattoo to look like. The card that I pulled for this episode is number 7, Bridget, the snake and fire goddess. And it has the keyword transformation. And it's funny because it almost looks like in the picture, it almost looks like Medusa. It has 3 snakes climbing up the body of a woman, and she almost looks like her hair is in snakes too. So I'm going to show it on the video for those of you who are watching video. If you watch my episodes on YouTube, you'll be able to see the video. And yeah, so the 3 snakes, it's a very feminine symbolism, but also Bridget being the goddess of healing and flame and the goddess of spring in the stories of Bridget in Ireland. If you remember my episode, we talked a little bit about this during the Imbolc season. February 1st is the start of Imbolc, and it is St. Bridget in Ireland. It's Bridget's Day, and it's very appropriate that this is the transformation card, because I particularly love working with Bridget in that it's the deity or the archetype of the healing and the healing flame. And in Reiki energy healing, we are attuned to an energy healing of called the Holy Fire, which is kind of a an energy that reflects the many different colors in the white light, and it is visualized as a white flame with many colors in the white flame. All the colors are encompassed into the white flame. And it is the healing energy that is light and love that is directed towards the people and clients that we are healing. And so when Bridget comes up, I'm always reminded of that same Reiki energy. Different traditions, different parts of the world, but it doesn't matter because I think that the purpose and the archetype and the vibrational frequency is aligned. It's the same. And the transformation symbol in this card is going to align us really well with our subject today because we are going to be talking about transformations. We're going to be talking about spaces and what that means in space and time and physical space, as well as mental and emotional and spiritual spaces, and what that means from the Celtic tradition and many other, I would dare say, indigenous or pagan traditions would have this theme, and we would all be able to understand it together. So we're going to talk a little bit about transformation. And so when you're listening to this, and with this card pulled for you today, I want you to ask yourself some questions. Am I in a space where I am coming out of a certain thing, a certain space, a certain relationship, or a certain job that I have held? And I know that this is a time when I need to let some of that go, or I need to walk away from it and go into a space that's a lot more uncomfortable for me, but in the hopes that I will move into a space that is just right for me. We're going to talk a little bit about that in this episode today anyway. So I kind of love that this card brought that subject up for you. And in listening to what this card means is this idea that the space we are in sometimes becomes so difficult, even though it's familiar, even though there is some safety and certainty and security in the space that we are in. But when we start to grow out of it, or when we start to maybe understand in our body and in our mind that the vibration is not right for us, we're not resonating with it, the hard of staying in that becomes much more, much greater than the hard of leaving it. And I think a lot of us have experienced that, especially if you're older like me, in your midlife, reaching your Crohn's age, the age of wisdom, I like to believe. I like to believe that my getting older has something to look forward to, that I am not just leaving youth and that's it. I get to be just old. I like to believe that there is something I gain from it, which is the wisdom and experience of being an older age. And being in that space, a lot of us have experienced moments in our lives where we know that we have to let go of what we've been doing because it is too hard to try to continue to keep it. And in order to let that go, we have to transition into this new space. So I'm going to begin by talking about the subject we are going to talk about today. First, I would like to retract some statements that I made in other episodes. Sometimes when I get talking and I don't have an exact script of what it is I'm going to say, I use words that I find out later were totally not what I meant to say. I'm sure if I listened to all of my episodes back, I would be like smacking my forehead over and over again. Like, oh my gosh, did I really say that? That's not even what I meant. And so hopefully you can forgive me if you've been listening to my episodes so far and understand that sometimes I say things and I didn't even realize that's what I said. But luckily my mom listens and she was able to pull this forward for me. She says, I've noticed sometimes when you talk about your experience in Mormonism or in being a member of the church in your youth, You use the word fundamentalist when you talk about Mormon. And I think what I meant to say was fundamentalist as far as a religion goes. But actually, fundamentalist Mormon is an actual thing. You may have seen that on the news, like the arresting of Warren Jeffs, who was the prophet of the fundamentalist LDS Church, and things like that. So there are associations to the word fundamentalist Mormon that I totally did not mean to say. So let me retract that now and here, and let's set the record straight. I am not, nor have I ever been, part of the fundamentalist Mormon Church. What I meant to say was the Orthodox, the LDS Church, that I came from a background in my family history where on both sides of my family and my husband's family, they have been part of the LDS Church and were pretty Orthodox, meaning that they followed the rules. They were true believers. They believed in it wholeheartedly and had a testimony of that church and everything that comes with that. So sometimes we use words like a TBM, true believing Mormon, or sometimes we say things like card carrying Mormon, which is not just a funny saying to say, but actually members of the church do carry a temple recommend card that they have passed all of their interviews and have been able to be deemed worthy by authority figures of the church and allowed to go into their sacred temples. I was at one point in my life a card carrying Mormon. So I want to just clarify that real quick while I have a chance and let you know that in previous episodes, when I've used the word fundamentalist, I did not mean that literally. So sometimes fundamentalist is just used as a word to mean like if you were fundamentalist Christian, you were, very devout in the Christian faith and only in that faith. So that is where I'm coming from with that. I did not come from a family that practiced polygamy. I did not, not in my more recent ancestry. I am absolutely positive there were members of my family in the early church days that did practice polygamy. So that's how far back that goes. But there are sects of Mormonism that practiced polygamy in the beginning when Joseph Smith founded the church, and then there have been branches of that church since then. Some of them went back to practicing polygamy. Some of them always practiced polygamy from that time, and some, like the mainstream LDS church that my family was a part of, have not practiced polygamy for many generations. So I hope I've clarified that and you kind of understand me and where I'm coming from just a little bit better. But I'd like to go into a story time if I can. I love to pull from the Welsh mythology that I've been studying for the last year. And one of my favorite tales is the story of Pwyll, of David. I am doing my very best to pronounce that in Welsh. All of this Welsh Duolingo I've been doing for 280 days. I hope it is finally paying off because I'm trying to pronounce those Welsh words correctly. If you are Welsh and you speak the Cymraeg language, please forgive me if I am not speaking it correctly. I do not have access to listening to that language on a daily basis. I'm much better at the Spanish dialect when I practice my Spanish because I do hear Spanish quite often in my world. But I'm doing my very best because I absolutely love the Welsh people and the Welsh history. So if you'll allow me to try, I'm going to tell this story and using the Welsh names. Pwyll is a prince and he is out hunting one day. And this is in the first branch of the Mabinogi. He's out hunting and he has his hunting dogs with him. And it just so happens that in his trek into the forest, and I am paraphrasing, I am retelling this. I'm not telling this straight from the words of the Mabinogi, but I do recommend that you read it yourself because it's beautiful language. I'm going to tell it in my own way, but he's out in the forest and unbeknownst to him, he crosses over into the other world. A lot of mythology in Ireland and Wales have stories of going into an other world or a Nuven or lots of different words for it. But The other world, a little bit different than the underworld of the Egyptian mythology. It is not the land of the dead, but it is similar in that it is a different dimension. It's kind of like walking through a portal. In some folklore or fairy tales, you'll hear that they went through a tunnel or they went through a tree, and all of a sudden they were in a different world. If you've watched Stranger Things, which I love, it's kind of like when they go into the upside down. All it took for them to go in the upside down was to go through a tree or a certain portal, and then all of a sudden they were in a world that looked exactly like their own, but different, darker, scarier, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of magical things can happen in the other world, much like on Stranger Things. Sometimes those are magical and light and sparkly, and sometimes they're not. The Fae have not always had a reputation of being magical and beautiful and helpful. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's monstrous, sometimes it's scary. In Welsh mythology, a lot of times the main characters, the heroes and the heroines, they will walk through to the other world without even realizing that they've done it. So it's not necessarily that distinct. So it's just kind of walking through the woods and then all of a sudden they're in the other world. So in this case, Pwyll is in the other world without even realizing he's gone there. But he does find, as he's hunting, he finds a stag that's already been killed. And there are dogs eating on the stag that are not his dogs. They're not his hounds, but these dogs are different. They are white with red ears, which is another indication that there's something a little bit different about these dogs. They're otherworld dogs. And he shoos the dogs away and allows his dogs to eat the stag instead. And this is offensive to the king of the other world. So the king of the other world finds him, and his name is Arun. And he says to Pwyll, hey, how dare you? You've offended me. This is my stag. My dogs were eating and you've taken it. And Pwyll, not realizing that he had offended someone, was very apologetic. And another reason I love the Welsh culture is that they're very into justice. It's a kind of they have a lot of tit for tat in their laws, that if you do someone wrong, you definitely make up for it. And once you're made up for it, all is good again. You should be able to let bygones be bygones. And so that's what the King Arun proposes to Pwyll. He says, if you'll do me a favor, I will forgive you for this offense. Now, to me, the favor seems like quite a big favor, but Pwyll agrees to it. He agrees that they are going to switch places for a year. So Anun is going to look and act just like Pwyll and go back to his court. And Pwyll is going to look and act just like Arun and go to the other world court. And he says, I have an enemy, the King Havgan, in the other world, and I am supposed to meet him in a year to battle. But every time I battle with him, I strike a deathly blow and he is going to die. And he says, strike me again and put me out of my misery. And I strike him again and he revives. It's magic. He keeps coming back to life and I cannot kill him. But if you go in my place, you can strike him when we battle again next year, in 1 year, and you can kill him for good. And I need you to do this for me. But I'll need you to spend the year pretending to be me in my court with my queen and my earls and all of that. And so Pwyll agrees. And magically, they are able to disguise themselves so that they look like the other one. And they switch places. And during this year, Pwyll is pretending to be Arun in the court, and he sits next to the queen, who he finds to be the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, because every woman in mythology is the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. And during this year, he laughs and drinks and jokes and hunts and has the best time during the day with the queen and the court. And the queen thinks he's really, kind of perked up. Oh, this husband of mine, he's kind of fun to be around. But at night, when they go into bed together, the queen notices that she goes into bed with her husband, and her husband gives her no attention and no affection whatsoever. Simply turns over and goes to sleep. Finally, after the end of the year, he goes to battle to King Halfdan, and he does exactly as he's told. He strikes him with a deathly blow, and Halfdan says, "Please, for the love of God, mercy, please just strike me and put me out of my misery." And Pwyll says something like, "Oh, if you want, someone else can do that. I'm not going to strike you again. You can just die." Something like that. And he invites all of Halfdan's soldiers to join him on his side and become his soldiers. And they do, because they see him as a strong figure, and they join him. When they switch places again, it's kind of interesting, because when Arun is back at his own court again, he goes to bed with his queen, and he tries to give her a kiss or something. And she says, "What are you doing? It's been a whole year and you haven't paid me any attention at night. You were such a good, jovial husband during the day, but then when night would come, you wouldn't even touch me." And she had no idea that it wasn't him. But this is how Arun finds out that his friend Pwyll, the other king of Dyfed, he was a very honorable friend indeed, because he never made advances on his wife. And I think Arun probably expected him to. So this comes from the first tales of the first branch of the Mabinogi. And the reason I'm telling this story for today's episode is because it is a great example of how the spaces between are sacred to the Celtic people for good reason. That these are spaces where you can feel an energy or a difference when you have crossed over into these other worlds. And it's not always obvious, but that there are something to the magic and the sacredness and the ability to stop and pay attention when you're in these spaces. So you might be thinking, what are you talking about, Courtney? Why are you talking about in between spaces? What even is that? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those, what that means. And just so you know, this comes from The Mist-Filled Path, Celtic Wisdom for Exiles, Wanderers, and Seekers by Frank McCowan. I'm going to put that in my resources list for my blog for this episode. But I want to read a little quote from that book. And he talks about a passage of poems. And I just want to, this is in chapter 1, Reclaiming Our Holy Senses. And this is a little part of a poem. It says, "Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. People, many of them, our own ancestors and the souls of great teachers who wish for us a liberated existence, are going back and forth across the door sill where two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep." Oh, I get chills when I even read that, because to me that is a perfect introduction to what the in-between spaces are. If you refer back to episode 9, we talked a little bit about the Wheel of the Year. We talked about how solstices and equinoxes are pretty obvious markers of the year to say these are the halfway points when the dark and the light are equal. Equinoxes are spring equinox and autumn equinox. And the solstices mark the shortest day of the year and the longest day of the year, when the light dominates or when the dark dominates. And those are pretty distinct markers. Those are things that scientifically, because of the way that the earth moves around the sun, we can mark those occasions and we know exactly what day. We've decided to mark those as the beginning of winter, the beginning of summer, the beginning of spring and autumn. But in Celtic tradition, those in-between spaces are much more honored and sacred than the solstices are. So in Welsh culture, there is two distinct holidays or festivals or markers to the year, which is Calan Mai, which is Beltane or May 1st. They call that the start of summer because it's when we mark the beginning of summer and we've had the middle of planting season and all of that, and we're marking the transition from coming from winter into summer. And then we have Calan Gaeaf, which is Samhain, November 1st. Now, it might seem like, oh, those are kind of like bloop, random points of the year, but to the Celtic people, it's not. These in-between spaces between solstices or between a solstice and an equinox, these mark the dark and half lights of half of the year. So it's the dark half of the year and the light half of the year. And these spaces are honored because it is when the veil is thin. That is why All Hallows Eve, on the 31st of October, it marks the beginning. It marks just the night before Samhain, which is Hallows Day, or would be Calan Gaeaf on November 1st. We're sort of celebrating something that is happening at that time. And those traditions and folklore around that are, the veil is thin because this world and the other world, there is more connection, it's more obvious. If there were spirits from the other world or from the world of the dead, or even just spirits of nature, that would be a time when they can communicate with us, when we can hold space for them, when we can learn from them. And that poem talking about ancestors as teachers, that is kind of significant because, like in Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, making an ofrenda or an altar to honor those ancestors, not to be scared of them, not to make it into this spooky, we have to dress up and scare away the bad spirits. No, instead, it's more like I'm going to honor my ancestors and the spirits that have passed on by remembering them, by teaching them to my children so that they will stay alive in our hearts, and for us to even make offerings like a meal where we actually cook for them and put out food for them. And then we spend time together as a family honoring our ancestors and people who have gone before us. It's also a deep connection to the land, if you think about it, because we are sort of honoring those ancestors and the places that their bones are buried, and knowing that the land we stand on is a connection to those ancestors. So these in-between spaces are already seen as sacred, as something different than everyday life. And it gives us an opportunity to stop whatever busyness, whatever everyday life offers us, just the day-to-day tasks, the menial things, things we just don't stop to think about. It invites us to stop and be in stillness and just recognize that there is a transformation happening, a transformation of seasons, a transition from one space into another, and that is significant. So in the Mist-Filled Path, he talks about this because the mist, you will find folklore. The mist is in a lot of folklore in Celtic traditions. So the stories of King Arthur, for example, will talk about My leg is falling asleep. I'm going to shift myself over here for a second. Oh my goodness. I got so into what I was talking about, I completely forgot to let the blood flow into my legs. All right. So in the stories of King Arthur, we learn about Avalon. Avalon is a mythical place. There are a lot of places in England and Cornwall and Wales that claim to be Avalon, and I absolutely 100% believe that they all could be. For me, Glastonbury will always be Avalon, and that is where I go in my mind when I'm traveling to Avalon. But Avalon is an island, Isle of Apples. It is the sacred place where the priestesses of the goddess practice their magic and learn and teach and connect to the goddess. And they also learn the healing arts. So that is why Avalon is so sacred to me, because whether it's a real place or not does not matter. But Avalon is shrouded in mist. And like a lot of places in mythology, places shrouded in mist are always the other world. It's a sacred space, and it is also an in-between. It's not raining and it's not sunshine. It's that foggy moisture and thickness in the air, and that is an in-between subliminal space. And that's magical. That comes forward even into modern times. I mean, if those of you who can see in my video, I have a portrait of Elsa from Frozen on the wall. She's in my healing room because she helps with the energy of letting it go. That's what this is all about. Our energy, let it go, let it go. Okay. Well, in Frozen 2, for those of you who may or may not have seen it, if you have children, you probably have definitely seen it. And if you don't have children, please just watch it anyway. Those movies are amazing. In Frozen 2, there's a curse placed on the enchanted forest for a number of years, and they cannot access, no one can go in or out of the enchanted forest because there is a wall of mist surrounding it. So it's like that whole forest disappeared in the mists. That is what happens to Avalon in the stories of King Arthur. When King Arthur is wounded in battle, he is brought by his sister Morgane, or Morgause, depending on the version of the tale that you're listening to. She takes him back to Avalon. She's a priestess of Avalon, and she takes him back to heal him. And he goes into the mists. He goes to Avalon, and no one ever sees or hears from him or Avalon again. And the mythology of that, the legend is that he will return to England again when England needs him. That he has not died. He is just in Avalon. And these otherworldly places in story, they ascend time and space. So in any of the stories that I've read about the otherworld, it kind of is like a Rip Van Winkle effect, where you can go to a mythical place and you could spend 100 years there and come back, and it's only been a day for everyone else. So our time is not the same thing as their time. Even if you can move freely between those spaces, you will go and enter into a dimension that is going to have its own rules as far as how time works. So mist is a sacred space. But so are places like times of the day, dawn and twilight. These are the kind of witching hour type magical times of the day. And if you are sensitive to this kind of spirituality and this kind of to energies, and even if you're not, I would invite you to try, when you're going out, go for a walk during twilight when the sun is setting. It's not quite dark. Maybe just after the sun sets, but the nighttime dark hasn't set yet. And just notice what happens around you when there are dark shadows emerging all around you. Even as you walk through your neighborhood, the houses look different. The colors all gray and blue, and it's sort of peaceful. There is something that happens to the energy. If you have children, I don't think you can deny the witching hour exists. My children change from however they've behaved and however they've done all day into something completely different when twilight hits. Kind of like the energy of the full moon. It's either going to ramp them up to where they are just like, I have one son that literally hangs from the rafters. I mean, just, I don't even know what happens to him. He can be tired one minute and the next minute he's so hyper and so out of control. There's just nothing we can do but let him burn that energy off. Also, the quarter moon phases are really important to pay attention to. And if you are interested in using those phases of the moon to pay attention to your own cycles and to your own healing journey, I have started a series of live videos on Instagram. I would like to eventually turn it into a workshop or a class. But right now it's just a free live class that you can log on. So follow me on Instagram, because what we're going to be doing is every full moon, we're going to kind of make it our own space to talk about what sort of changes did you notice in the last month as from the last full moon? And then what do I want you to notice about this full moon? What are you releasing at the full moon? And then what are you going to notice throughout the phases of the month coming forward? And one thing I want you to pay attention to is at the quarter moon phases. So when the moon is showing you half of the moon, and it's either in the waxing or waning part of the cycle. So it's when waxing, when the moon is coming into the full moon, and the descending phase when it's going into the dark moon. And these spaces are really good markers to just notice what sort of things have been happening and what sort of things are coming up for you. Because when you're in the waning moon and you're in the quarter phase, the Avalonian cycles of healing mark that as the time of descent. So it actually marks the beginning of a new healing cycle, meaning that you've already gone through a cycle, you've released, you've accepted these new awarenesses and awakenings. But then when that quarter moon hits, you're going to have something come forward that's going to feel like, oh, now I'm going into the shadows. I'm going into the cauldron. I'm going into the cave. I'm going into the darkness towards the dark moon, which means that you're going to start to see yourself differently. You're going to start to see patterns you didn't notice before, or self-sabotaging behaviors and patterns you definitely feel like need to be addressed. So it can be kind of a rough time, because if there are certain things that's like, oh, I got myself into another relationship that was, I thought, great, but now I'm starting to see all of those same things that happened in the last relationship, and I definitely didn't want that. Or I'm starting to see how I'm showing up when there's stress, when there's triggers. I can see myself, coming forward with these behaviors that are, again, not really aligned with who I want to be. But that's a really powerful time of the month, those in-between spaces. I also love the idea and symbolism of doorways. And in that poem, it talks about going through a doorway because they're the meeting of two worlds. And that the ancestors and teachers are in the door sills. And that is a beautiful image to me, to understand that even as we walk from one room to another, our entire energy changes. And actually, neuroscience supports this, because they talk about how our brain chemicals shift when we go from one room to another. It's the same reason that you walk into a room, and as soon as you go through that doorway, you're like, wait, why was I here? Well, what did I come into this doorway for? And sometimes it's just old age, our memory not being what it used to be. But sometimes it is actually a neurological event that we have moved from one space that we know is for one purpose, and we've moved into a different space for a different purpose. And our brain chemicals changed so that we're like shifting into, okay, now I'm in the kitchen to cook or eat. But maybe we came into the kitchen for a different purpose, like to grab that thing we set down on the counter. And we don't even remember that that's what we came in there for, because our brain just shifted into kitchen, eat, right? So moving through spaces and portals can be really significant. It can be an energetic shift. It can be a mental shift. And I think we can actually use that to our advantage. Anytime we are going through something and we want to release something or we want to shift our focus, energetically going through a doorway, either in our meditation, imagine and visualize a doorway that is going to be for the purpose of leaving something behind and gaining something we want. Moving through those passageways, gateways, moon gates, doorways, whatever they are, it can be a really powerful symbol. When I was in England, I got a little bit obsessed with doorways, and I didn't even know why at the time, but now it's become significant to me. And when I came back, I had all these pictures that I took of doorways and gateways and archways, and even the Tower of St. Michael's at the top of the Tor in Glastonbury, which is to me a very, just powerful religious symbol, spiritual symbol. To me, walking through those doorways, I did not take that lightly. I did not take it as just sightseeing. I was up at the top of the Tor one morning because I did want to see the mists. I had been told that if you're there early in the morning, you can see the mists roll in, which is why it's associated with Avalon. But I think I got up a little too late, but I tried to hike up to the Tor in the morning, and I went with another fabulous lady on our sisterhood who was there at the pilgrimage with me. Her name is Audrey, and she went with me up to the top of the Tor, and we sat up there and we chatted and we looked out at the sheep fields around us and the English countryside. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely magical. But when we were getting ready to leave, I said, I want to walk through those doorways, those archways of the Tower of St. Michael's, and I want it to be significant. I want to address something I want to leave behind, and I want to walk through those doors ready to embrace something new. And I think that is a really important, powerful way to use those doorways magically, energetically, and with intention. So this idea of in-between spaces, it doesn't have to always fall at a certain time of year or a certain time of the month. It can happen anytime where you create a space that is an in-between space. And at the time I'm recording this, we are coming through a significant time of the year where we're talking about the story of Blodeuwedd. And if you didn't catch my live from the last full moon, you can always go onto my Instagram and find it. We talked about those in-between spaces where when something is too rigidly black or white, it doesn't allow us to see those spaces where two things can be true. And I think there is really significant power in being able to say two things can be true at the same time. For example, a lot of people get really, really hung up in being able to determine whether we are good or bad people. If I do these things, it means I'm a good person. And if I do these things, it means I'm a bad person. But at some point in our lives, we have to address the idea that maybe, possibly, we can do things and be good and bad people, or none of those things at all. We can do things and it actually doesn't mean we're good or bad, because two things can be true at the same time. And I'm trying to think of a good example on this, but the best thing that comes up for me is in the last year, I've really been having to face the ethical and moral dilemmas of what it means to be an adoptive mother. And I will go into this more in a different episode because it's way too much to go into right now. But basically, I came to the idea that having gone through the experience of having a son or adopting a child and being an adoptive mother, there are schools of thought that what I did was selfish and who I am is a bad person because I did that. And there are other people and other schools of thought that adopting a child and raising a child that I did not biologically carry and give birth to makes me a wonderful person. Some people, really kind of put it up there with sainthood for some reason. I'm not one of those people, but I was really conflicted because I had not considered all the variables when I was going through starting my family and becoming a mother and adopting my son and what that meant. But I really appreciate the people who have brought it to my attention that what I need to face is that perhaps in doing that, I am a bad person. And also I'm a good person. And maybe even though those two things are opposing ideas, it's actually possible that both of those things can be true at the exact same time. And that I'm not sure if I can actually call myself a good person or a bad person because I adopted a child. But it is possible that both of those things are true. And there you go. That's about all I will say about that at this point in time. I'm sure that can spark a debate that will last hours and days and months and weeks and years, but I will address that more at a different time. I just want to kind of leave you with that idea that there can be two opposing ideas and they can be both true at the same time. And you will find those moments in your life as well. But I want to point out that phases of transition are very difficult. They can be a process. And for me, this comes up most significantly in the healing cycles. States of transitions are very hard. They're very difficult because you are moving into a space that felt comfortable for you, and now you're moving into a space that is going to be confusing. And it's going to offer some difficulty in being able to go, well, what now? If that's true, or if something new is true, then what now? And I just want to help you understand that when you are shifting energies into something that is higher and more authentic and more aligned and a higher energy level for you, it's not easy. It's not comfortable. And it does come with a stage of confusion. And I always tell people that while being confused and having that state of confusion, it's not comfortable. I know for myself, I very much rely on certainty. I like a plan. I like to know what I'm about, and I like to know what I'm doing. And when I don't, I feel very, very uncomfortable. So I understand that is hard. But as someone I know, a wise person said to me, confusion is actually a great, great thing. If you're in a state of confusion because you're like, oh, wait, what I thought was true or what was going to happen isn't true and isn't happening. So now what do I do? I'm totally confused. I don't know what direction to hang my hat. I don't know where to plant my feet. I don't know what path to take. I'm so confused. That means that you are in a space that you're ready to let something go that did not serve you. And invite and welcome a new and better way when it comes up. So you can't possibly have that experience if you don't have that confusion state, right? Okay. There is so much more to say about this, but for the sake of time, because we are running out of time and it's been a long episode already, I'm going to just finish off with a question from a listener. Summer solstice celebrations are happening right now as this episode is releasing, and I want to give you a quick a question that I had from a listener was, how do I mark this occasion? How do I celebrate summer solstice? And to that I say, it is up to you what you do. So many different ancient traditions have carried over, but there's always room for new traditions to take place. So when your family and you want to mark this occasion as summer comes up, it might be like your summer thing to do is this big 4th of July celebrations that you do. Or it could be in recognizing that the sun and the masculine energy of the sun is dominant at this time. So there's a lot to accomplish. It just means that this is a time to reflect on what all you've done this year so far. What all have you accomplished in the month since January? Maybe you set some New Year's resolutions, and this is a good time to take stock on what your goals were and what you've gotten done. And not beat yourself up over what you haven't gotten done, but more likely to say, this is the time to get it done. The sun is out for longer, for more hours of the day. And that just means more energy and more time to get things done. So soak it in. Be like, what in the months that I am resting during the hibernation winter, what was I hoping to accomplish during the summertime when there are more daylight hours? So this is just a good time to reflect on that. And that would be my answer, my suggestion to that question. All right, friends, it is time to wrap it up. I hope that you have had as much fun as I have talking about Celtic spirituality, the mists of Avalon, and the in-between spaces, the sunset and the sunrise that are sacred, the Islamic traditions and the prayer of Fajr during Ramadan, praying at sunset and sunrise. It's just another example of how those spaces can be held as sacred in more than just the Celtic tradition. In almost every traditions around the world have something to do with sunrise and sunset. So those spaces are sacred, and it is time to notice them. It's time to be aware of them and be open to what messages from those spiritual realms, ancestors, and teachers that you would like to receive. All right. Next week, our episode is going to be about the brain. I don't exactly know what to call the episode yet, so the title of the episode is TBA, but I know that I want to talk about all of the inner workings of your brain. So if you are a sciencey type person and you want some data and facts to go along with all this spirituality and voodoo, ludo, hoo-hoo type of thing, then next week is definitely an episode you're going to want to tune into. So I would like to invite you to follow me on social media. If you would like to follow me on Instagram, I do live readings and live full moon rituals and gatherings and discussion groups. And so that is a great place to get more information and more about what I'm learning and studying as I coming to it. So I like to share that on my Instagram most. That's on @prism_healing. I would like you to follow me on Facebook, Courtney Pwyll, or Courtney Pwyll's Prism Healing is my business page. My TikTok is @Prism Healing. And of course, I do book private sessions of emotional healing processes or Reiki sessions. And the best thing you can do for me if you'd like to help support me is to just like, follow, and subscribe to any of my socials or to this podcast specifically, because it helps us to know how many people are enjoying it, how many people are getting the information as I'm putting it out there, and actually benefiting from the content that I put out. So if you could just like, share, subscribe any of the episodes or any of my social media posts, it would be such a cool, awesome help for me. If you have participated in any of my workshops or my services, give me a Google review on Prism Healing and leave me a review that tells about your experience. Or even just share with a friend or a relative what you've experienced and if you think that what I do might help them. I've been booking a lot more emotional processes during the summer. My kids are home now from school, but I still can do services, anything from on the phone, virtual. I can do it from anywhere around the world. Wherever you are, you can still receive my healing. And I would love to offer that to you. Yeah, and you can also private message me anything that you have inquiries about. If you have a personal question about something you've been going through, or if you just have a question about magical and spiritual practices that I can help you with or point you in the right direction, I would love to do that. What else? I love you. You are awesome. Thank you for listening. And I would like to thank Just Blaine, my producer at Ride the Wave Media. He's also the host of Radio Daybreak. And he is the owner and operator of Ride the Wave Media. So thank you so much, Just Blaine, for all of your hard work and for supporting this show and the editing and promoting that goes behind it. So I would like to also thank Sarah at Daybreak Treasures Boutique for featuring me as an artist on her local artists online boutique. So go check it out if you want to see some artwork that I and other local artists of Daybreak have created. It's awesome. Daybreak Treasures Boutique. And until next time, go make magic with witches and wizards. Go make magic.